Hi everybody! Welcome to the South Whitby Elementary School Culinary Classroom. I'm Farmer Kylie, and today we're going to learn about making a veggie egg scramble for breakfast or dinner. You can eat it whenever you want. But basically, we're going to add to the video that we released a few weeks ago that was about stir fry. And if you'd like to watch that, that has some details about the order to add your vegetables and things like that. And there's a link in the description below. So today what I'm going to focus on more than how to do the veggie side of it is how to do the eggs and add those once you're ready. Basically everything before that is very similar to the stir fry, minus the soy sauce. So I'm just going to whiz through cutting up these veggies. I'll have a few little notes throughout that, but we'll just zip ahead to the eggs. All right, the first thing we're going to add is the onion and then the garlic, and that's generally what you do in all cooking. And these onions are really nice because they have their greens on them still, so I don't have to worry about it rolling and slipping and cutting myself. I'm just going to hold on to the greens out here. Going to cut off the roots, put those in the compost. And then I'm actually going to cut the greens off, and I'm going to put the big flat bottom down and cut it in half. So there's a nice long flat side that I can sit it on to cut it. Scoot these out of the way so you can see a little bit. And then clawing and sawing, of course, we're just going to cut thin slices. Okay, see that? It's really thin. I'm not going to cut it, I'm not going to mince it or cut it really small. I'm just going to keep it kind of big. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on my heat and get my oil heating up. But if you're a little bit more of a novice, a little bit more new to cooking, you might want to go ahead and cut up all your veggies before you turn on the stovetop. That way there's no rush, because nobody should be rushing when they're using a knife, because that is how things go awry and you end up hurting yourself. All right. So then the green part of this onion is totally edible also. I'm going to add it a little bit later in the cooking, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it up now. There's some brown tips in here. I'll get rid of those. Okay. So when you're making a veggie scramble, the important thing to think about is your ratio. Like how many veggies to how many eggs. It's usually less veggies than you would think to the number of eggs, but if you get too many veggies, then it's still delicious. So just play around with it, and each time you make a veggie scramble, think about how much egg to veggie you put in, and then adjust it next time if it felt like it was too many veggies. So I'm going to do one pretty small potato, and be very careful when you're cutting this. I'm going to hold both sides of it, and then I have the tip of my knife down, and then I'm going to rock it back. Okay, that is the most dangerous part, is when these things can roll. Okay, so now it has a flat side, and I'm going to cut that in half. And generally for egg scrambles, you want to cut things pretty small, because it's generally breakfast and you're like, let's go, let's get this thing cooking. And remember, last time I said the smaller you cut things, the faster they'll cook. And also remember that each veggie, you want the parts to be the same size as each other. Like my potato pieces don't have to be the same size as my onion pieces, but my potato pieces should all be about the same size as each other. Same for carrot pieces, all the pieces of each vegetable. So I'm going to cut these into, it's about a 1/2 inch cube. Okay. So I cut it one way down the middle, but if you have a big fat potato, you'll have to cut it more times the lengthways before you cut it this way. Okay, I might not even use all that potato. That's actually quite a bit. So So I'm just making, while I'm waiting for my stove to heat up, because mine takes a little while, if you recall, I'm just making little piles of veggies on my mat, or my cutting board. Let's do the garlic. I think I would like to put a whole clove in mine. That might be a lot for some of you guys, for just a single person scramble. But if you're making a scramble for your whole family, go for it. You could put a couple cloves. So when you are, we'll talk about number of eggs later, okay? Right now, let's just stick with the veggies. So I'm just gonna slice this one way using my claw and saw. And if it starts to slip, I'm gonna stop and put it on its flat side. I'm always paying attention to if the veggies are moving. Okay, and now I have my fingers way out of the way here. And I like my garlic chunks kind of big, so I occasionally get a chunk in my mouth and I can say, oh, garlic, I love garlic. Okay, then we'll do one small carrot in this one. This is going to be a scramble pretty much for one or maybe two people, okay, the amount of veggies I'm doing here. So if you're doing one for your whole family, you'll want to adjust. And if you have too much, some people probably would disagree with me on this, but I think that eggs are fine later in the day. You can just put them in the fridge and have them warm them up later. Okay, so I'm going to cut my carrot the same way I cut my potato. I cut it lengthwise so it has flat sides. Then I put those flat sides down, and then I'm going to cut those, and I'm cutting them into little half circles, but you could make them quarter circles as well. I'm trying to cut them all the same thickness. Sometimes if I get a fat one accidentally, rather than trying to cut it thin, I just eat it. Because trying to cut a little piece thin can be kind of hard, and it's more dangerous. You might slip and get your finger. So it's a nice little perk when you're cooking. You get a little snack as you go. Okay, what else do we have here? I have tomatoes. I'm not ready for those yet. Broccoli. I'm just going to do one small one. And I'm going to cut the stem part off and then cut it in pretty small pieces because it's a lot more hardy than the floret part of the broccoli, that fluffy top part. So I'm going to cut it pretty small, and then the floret part I'm going to cut and turn till it's really, you see this, how it's really fine. Okay, got my piles going here. Okay, this is getting warm, but I'm going to wait still. This is way more zucchini than we need, so I'm just going to cut off a little bit of the end and set the rest of it aside, and I'll put it back in the refrigerator in a bag after. I'm going to cut off this little end part, put it in the compost. Then this is the same as the other things. It's round, it's slippery, so I'm going to stabilize it with my fingers and put the tip of my knife down on the board and then go back. All right, I'm going to cut this one in quarters and then nice thin slices. Look at those on my knife there. Okay. I can start to smell that the pan is getting hot. Do you guys know what that smells like? The smell of hot metal. It's a good smell to get acquainted with, because if you smell hot metal and you're not supposed to be smelling hot metal, that's a good thing to pay attention to and try to find what's going on your stove or wherever. Okay, so then we just have, I'm going to do one kale leaf, maybe just half of a kale leaf, because we have a lot of other veggies. I'm going to rip it up into pretty small pieces, and look out if you have the stem part like that. Make sure you get it nice and small so you don't get a big string in your eggs, because that's not very pleasant. Okay. And I'm going to cut up the tomatoes at the end and grate the cheese after the veggies are cooking. because the tomatoes are pretty wet, I'm not going to put them in with the eggs. I'm going to put them just cut up on top. So that's something you want to think about when you're making scrambled eggs. You don't want them to be too wet, okay? Because then they just don't quite cook up as well if they get wet from the veggies. So my pan is hot. Actually, it's too hot, I think. So I'm turning it down a little bit. And then I'm gonna let it cool for a second. While I'm letting this cool a little bit, I'll go ahead and crack my eggs, okay? So I'm gonna use the same bowl that they were sitting in. I'm gonna take them out and be careful to put them somewhere that they're not gonna roll, because you don't want to be cleaning up eggs off the floor, because that is not fun, okay? So I'm gonna take the egg and crack it gently, but firmly, somehow, firmly and gently at the same time, on the edge of this bowl, okay? See, I got a nice crack there. It's already leaking out. And then I'm gonna use my thumbs, gently press in there. And after every single egg, I want you to look in your bowl and make sure that there are not any shells, okay? That's looking good. I'm gonna do 3 eggs, which if you're really hungry, one person can do 3 eggs. That's what they do at a lot of restaurants. They'll make a 3-egg omelet. But generally I would say 2 eggs per person is a good amount. But some people don't like that much egg, so some people would go more for 1. It's up to you. As always in cooking class, this is your meal that you're making, so you can decide what you want to do. So, got my eggs in here. Now I'm going to take a fork and gently beat them, okay, until they're all mixed together, okay? And something that a lot of people don't do that helps make your eggs extra creamy and fluffy is add a little bit of water. Some people add milk or cream. That's great too. I'm gonna do a little bit of water because I know we all have that at our house. Just a little bit, okay? And what happens when you add the water, it emulsifies, which we've talked about a little bit before, but the fat of the egg and the water kind of like combine and become this fluffier thing. Like mayonnaise is something that's emulsified. That's a vinegar and oil and egg that are all mixed together, and that's how it stays like creamy. So we're trying to make our eggs extra creamy right now. So I put the water in, I'm gonna beat it some more, get some nice stuff going on in there. The timer went off when we knock it. Okay, that's looking really good and creamy. My pan is hot. Now I need to add some oil. And I need to get a hot pad. I'll be right back. Ta-da! Okay, now I got my hot pad because this pan handle got hot. Some of your pans will have a plastic handle that won't get as hot. And what other safety things do we need to remember about the pan? Remember, your handle should always be in towards the back of the stove, so it's not hanging out around where you're moving, because you might bonk it, you might whack it with your arm and throw hot oil and veggies everywhere, and that is never a good idea, okay? So, I have my oil in here, and it's just, an exact amount is hard to say, but maybe about a tablespoon. You don't want it to be swimming in oil, but you want the whole pan to be covered on the bottom. Okay, and we can always add more if things start to stick. So, whoa, almost lost my veggies. See, we have all our veggies. We got garlic, onion, potato, carrot, zucchini, broccoli, green onion, and kale, okay? So we're gonna start with the onion and the garlic. Well, we'll start with just the onion. Garlic can burn sometimes. Woo! And that splattered just a little bit, so make sure you get nice and close to your pan when you add them. I think I put a little bit too much oil, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and add the potatoes and the onions. potatoes and carrots to the onions because my potatoes are kind of big, I'm noticing. So they're gonna need a little bit of extra time. And all these veggies, this is totally your choice. You could just do garlic and onion and broccoli. That would be delicious. You could do spinach, all sorts of things. We're doing kale. Let's see what else. You could put beets in your eggs. That would be good. And herbs. Some basil would be good in here. This potato is extra big. I didn't quite cut it small enough, so I'm going to cut it again and put it back in. Okay. So this is going to take a little bit. You're going to cook this until you can scoop one of the potatoes out. Easier said than done. Scoop one of your potatoes out and get it on your cutting board and let it cool a little bit, and then try it and see if it's pretty soft. You want it to be almost completely cooked to the amount that you want it to be cooked. And all of this is personal preference. Some people like their vegetables really, really cooked to death, they say. Some people like them with a little more crunch, so you get to decide what you would like. But just know adding things in a certain order, the thicker, heartier stuff first, and then the leafy, wimpy stuff later, then things will all cook hopefully the way that you want them to. Because if you put your kale in at the beginning, it'll get all like totally crazy cooked. It'll be kind of like olive colored, like not. You want your kale to be bright green, and all of your green things should be vibrant green when you cook them. That's when they're really the best. So let me get my oven mitt on. I'll show you this. These guys are cooking nicely. And some people might want more onion than I put in there too, but we are going to add more green onion later. So yeah, this is definitely more oil than I should have put in, but it'll be good to help the egg not stick later. If you have a non-stick pan, you're going to want to use something that is, this is silicone, something plastic or silicone or wooden, but don't use a metal spatula on a non-stick surface. So ask your parents if the pan is non-stick and if there's anything special you should use to cook on it. And always ask them if you can use the stove, obviously. Also, the stove can be a dangerous thing, so keep people informed when you're wanting to use it. So now this is cooked a little bit. I'm going to add the garlic and the broccoli stems. All right. And I'm going to wait just a little bit more, and then we'll add the zucchini. I'm going to find the biggest potato in here. Another thing you can do to speed up the cooking process is to put a lid on here. That will definitely help. This still feels pretty hard. I'm going to try it. Ooh, hot. It's pretty hard, but we're progressing. So while I'm waiting on those to cook more, I'm going to add salt. I probably should have put the salt in a little bit earlier, but there is so much freedom in cooking, you guys. When you forget something, you can always fix it, almost always. If I just put a bunch of sugar in here, it might be hard to recover. But I'm putting pepper too because I like pepper. So that's going well. I'm going to grate some cheese while we're waiting too. So cheese is not necessary, but it's a nice addition. You don't have to grate it either. You can cut it into little pieces too and put it in there. And you don't need very much. Okay, that's plenty. So I just have a little pile of cheese, and it's going to make it really nice and rich. Make it get you through more of your day before you get hungry again. Also, while I'm waiting, I'm going to cut these tomatoes that are going to go on top. The cherries we'll just cut in half and then a quarter. This one I'm going to cut in half and then cut it into some smaller bits. And tomatoes also can be really slippery, so be really, really careful. And sometimes it's easier, it's usually easier if you have a serrated knife, the kind of knife that has the little teeth, boop, 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 that grabs the skin of the tomato and cuts it a little bit better, especially if your straight edge knife isn't very sharp. You're going to want a serrated knife. You can use a steak knife, even a bread knife. Okay, so these are probably pretty good, judging how they were before. So we're going to add the zucchini now. And I'm not going to add all of it because I'm getting kind of full on the veggie front over here, considering I still have broccoli and kale and green onions to put in. Let this zucchini cook a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to add the broccoli. And if you like your broccoli cooked a little bit more, you could add it earlier than that. So I'm going to add the broccoli and the green onions. And then all we have left to add is the kale. Let's take a look at this. Oops. See that? It's looking really colorful. And remember from our stir fry class, we want to eat our rainbow. So we have green and orange in here. And we're going to add the red tomato. And then if you look at this kale, I don't know if you can see that, it's got purple stems. So we're actually getting a little bit of purple in our eggs too, which is rare. Okay, so this is cooking nicely. I'm going to add the kale. And if you really like your greens and you really want to get your day started off with a bunch of good nutrients, you can add a bunch of kale. Make it a really kale-y egg dish. Okay, so now we're ready. Make sure, so look, stir it around a little bit and make sure that there's still enough oil on the bottom that the egg's not going to stick. Mine still has a good coating, but if yours is starting to look a little bit dry, you can add a little bit more oil before you do your eggs. I'm going to whip these up one more time and think about where I'm putting my eggy fork so I don't have to clean up a big egg smudge. Okay, so now I'm going to pour this in and then use my spatula to get the rest of it out. If you don't have a spatula and you end up leaving some in the bowl, that's totally fine. All right. And then I'm not going to stir it. I'm just going to let it cook a little bit so that the bottom side gets cooked and the top is still raw. So I'm starting to see, let's see if you can see this. On the edge here, it's starting to get a lighter color and it's definitely drying out, like it's getting cooked. Okay, so I'm gonna grab the handle, stick my spatula, get that part kind of cut away from the edge, and go underneath, and then I'm gonna rotate the pan back just a little bit. Do not spill your eggs on the floor. And while I'm lifting up the eggs that are cooked, I'm pouring the raw eggs underneath it. And you can kind of go around the pan, lifting up different parts and then pouring the eggs underneath it. This is pretty advanced. Don't feel bad if you just want to skip this part and just scramble up your eggs. That's totally acceptable. Okay, then I'm going to let it cook just a second longer. Now the whole bottom is getting nice and cooked, but the top is still kind of raw. This is not quite when I'm going to add the cheese. Sorry, I got all excited about adding the cheese. The cheese is my favorite part, other than all these healthy veggies. So then I'm going to take my spatula and get it all off of all the pan, and then I'm gonna kind of flip and break it up. Okay, see that? But you want to not like chop it to death. You want to leave some of those nice big egg pieces together. Okay? Now is when you're going to add your cheese. Okay, sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. When I think about cheese, it makes me want to sing. Why is cheese so good? I think it's all the fat in it. Our body wants that. Okay, so then now I have my cheese in there. I'm just gonna do a little bit of a flip to get it kind of worked in, but I'm not gonna stir it all crazy, just like folding it, I believe is the term we should use. So you're gonna fold the eggs and the cheese, and then as usual, this is gonna keep cooking. So I'm gonna get a plate. It will still keep cooking even on my plate, but a little bit less. So I'm going to take it out of the pan, and you just want to make sure that all of the egg is cooked and not runny. All right. And notice I didn't put that back on the hot burner because there's still some egg in it, and if I put it on the burner, then that will just cook really hard and it'll be super hard to clean, and I'm all about making it easier to clean up. Okay, so then what do we have left? We just have tomatoes. So I'm going to take these tomatoes and I'm going to try to make them pretty, because you know they say you eat with your eyes first. Okay, oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous. Just kidding, but it does look delicious. Okay, so here's your veggie scramble. This one was 3 eggs, and it looks like a great ratio with the number of veggies that I added. But you guys just have to experiment. Cooking is just, you're constantly learning. Every time you cook, you need to be thinking about what you're doing and how you would do it differently. And try it and think, what would I add? What would I take away? All those things. Don't get discouraged. It is a lifelong learning experience. And you can always look online and find recipes. We talk about that all the time. So yeah, I'm so excited to do a Zoom class on this also, and we can answer questions there if you guys have any. Or feel free to email me at schoolfarmculinary.com at gmail.com. schoolfarmculinary@gmail.com. Whew, it's kind of warm today. My brain's not really working that well. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm going to go eat my breakfast, and I hope that you have a lovely day and that you have a great time cooking. All right, take care.